At 53, I thought I had it all. A corner office overlooking San Francisco Bay, a seven-figure contract signed with Amazon. Colleagues admired me, recruiters chased me. Then one afternoon, my wife walked into the room, held up her phone, and played a video. Our son taking his first steps, without me. "You were in New York," she said quietly. "Sealing that deal. I sent you this, but you never watched it." I stared at the screen. My son wobbled forward, arms outstretched, laughing, toward no one. I missed it. I wasn't there. And the worst part? I remembered the date I signed that contract. April 16th. I even remembered the suit I wore, the steak I ordered that night. But I had no memory of my son's milestone. I had built a life so big, so loud, so full of ambition, that I couldn't hear the silence growing at home. I had provided everything, except presence. The next morning, I woke up in a king-sized bed in a house full of rooms, and not one felt like home. That was the beginning. The moment I realized I had a choice to make. Keep climbing a ladder that led me away from everyone I loved, or find a way back if there was still time. If you've ever wondered whether success is worth the cost of your family, this story might just make you stop and turn around before it's too late. My name is Nathaniel Harris, but everyone calls me Nate. I'm 53 years old, a tech logistics strategist who used to be obsessed with one thing: never going back to where I came from. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. My father died when I was 11, leaving my mother to raise 3 boys with 2 jobs and a prayer. I remember nights when she skipped dinner just so we could have seconds. I swore I'd never let my family live like that. I didn't just want stability, I wanted triumph. I wanted the American dream, and I chased it like a man possessed. By 28, I had clawed my way into the industry. I landed an operations analyst job at a mid-sized logistics firm in Chicago. I had no connections, just a resume soaked in sweat and sacrifice. I was the first to arrive, last to leave, and I made sure every higher-up knew my name. My bosses loved my hustle. My colleagues tolerated it. It was also the year I met Lily. She was a graphic designer, sharp, witty, grounded, everything I wasn't. We met at a friend's barbecue and spent the entire afternoon debating whether success was built or inherited. I was intense. She was calm. Somehow it worked. She understood my hunger, and I admired her ability to laugh at the world I took too seriously. We got married 2 years later in a modest backyard ceremony under strings of dollar store lights. There were no violins or champagne fountains, just the people who mattered. She wore a second-hand dress. I wore my only suit. And for the first time in years, I felt like I didn't need to prove anything. When Lily got pregnant with our son, Mason, I felt an unfamiliar emotion. Fear. Not the kind that drove me to stay late at the office or beg for promotions. No, this was deeper. I was terrified of failing him, of not being the father mine never got to be. I told myself, I'll work twice as hard, make twice the money, so he never has to feel small. In the beginning, I balanced it well. I was up at 6 a.m. to feed Mason while Lily slept. I made silly airplane noises while spooning mashed peas into his mouth. I'd rush home to catch his first giggles, his bath time chaos. Work was intense, but I carved out time like my life depended on it, because it did. Those days were golden. I remember sitting on our apartment floor, Mason asleep on my chest, Lily beside me, laughing at some stupid thing I said. We didn't have much. Hand-me-down furniture, ramen dinners, but we had each other, and that felt invincible. Then the promotions came. First, a lead coordinator role, then senior project manager. The money got better, the emails got louder, the meetings multiplied. My phone buzzed at dinner, during bedtime stories, in the middle of conversations. I still told myself I was doing it for them. Every spreadsheet, every late-night flight, every weekend call. Just a little longer, I'd whisper to Lily. Once I get through this quarter. She believed me. God bless her. She believed me. When Mason turned 3, I missed his first school recital because of a client pitch in New York. Lily sent me a video. I watched it on the plane. He stood there wearing a paper crown, singing, "You Are My Sunshine." I smiled, then opened my laptop and dove back into numbers. At the time, I didn't realize what I was trading. One missed event. That's all it felt like. But that's the thing with ambition. It never asks if you're ready. It just keeps pulling. By the time Mason was 5, I had joined a rising logistics firm that was rapidly courting Amazon. The CEO took me under his wing. "You've got a killer instinct," he said. "We're going places." I saw my path to vice president. I saw bigger homes, better schools, financial safety nets. I saw my promise to my mother fulfilled. What I didn't see, what I refused to see, was the slow erosion of the world I had once treasured. Lily stopped waiting up at night. Mason stopped asking if I'd be home for dinner, and I kept telling myself, once this deal closes, everything will go back to normal. I had no idea that normal had already packed its bags and left the house. The offer came in an email titled Confidential Expansion Opportunity. It was from Titan Freight Systems, one of the largest logistics powerhouses in the country. They were expanding aggressively and needed senior strategists with vision and backbone. My name had come up through industry whispers. It felt like a coronation. I showed the email to Lily that night while Mason played with Legos on the carpet. She smiled, genuine but cautious. "It sounds incredible," she said. "But it's in Seattle." "I know," I replied, trying to sound calm. "But it's remote-friendly at first. I could fly out once a month, work from home otherwise." We sat in silence, both hearing the unspoken terms beneath the offer. The next week, I accepted. The role was demanding but manageable. At first. I still made time to build pillow forts with Mason and cook late dinners with Lily. I flew to Seattle 1 week per month, then came home with stories and souvenirs. Mason called it Dad's treasure bag. I convinced myself we were balancing just fine. But balance is a fragile illusion. Within a year, Titan's Amazon integration project went into hyperdrive. My name was floated to lead it. "You're the only one who sees the full picture," my VP said. "This could be your legacy." Legacy. The word felt sacred, dangerous, powerful. I said yes without asking Lily. That was the beginning of the shift, the quiet, almost invisible pivot from being present to being peripheral. Workdays stretched longer. A single red-eye flight turned into 2-week stretches. Zoom calls bled into dinner. "Just this quarter," I'd whisper, as if saying it softly would make it more believable. Lily didn't fight it, not at first. She adapted like she always did. She juggled preschool drop-offs, bills, pediatrician appointments, late-night nightmares. She smiled when I walked in the door, exhausted. She asked about my projects, listened to my frustrations, tried to stay involved in a world that was moving too fast for her to grasp. One night, after a 14-hour workday, I came home to find a drawing on the fridge. Crayon scrawls of stick figures, a house, a boy, a woman, and a dog. No dad. "Where's Daddy in the picture?" I asked Mason, kneeling beside him. He looked up, shrugged. "You're at work." That moment pierced something in me. But instead of changing course, I buried it, tucked it beneath performance reviews and KPI targets. Then came Mason's 5th birthday. We had planned a backyard party, just close friends and family. I was supposed to fly in the night before. But the Amazon deal hit a critical snag. The meeting couldn't move. My presence was non-negotiable. I told Lily I'd try to catch a morning flight, maybe make it before the cake. I didn't. Instead, I sat in a glass conference room, negotiating delivery routes and SLA clauses, while Mason blew out candles without me. Lily sent me photos. Mason in a superhero cape, frosting on his cheek, holding a balloon sword. I stared at the images between calls, my chest tight, fingers numb. That night in the hotel room, I video called home. Mason answered but didn't smile. "Did you like the present I sent?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, looking off screen. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there, buddy. This deal..." He cut me off. "It's okay. Mom was." Then he handed the phone to Lily and ran out of frame. She looked tired. More than that, hollow. "I told him you tried," she said. "He said he's used to it." I nodded, ashamed. "I'll make it up to him." Her lips twitched, not a smile, not a frown, something between disbelief and surrender. "You've been saying that for 2 years, Nate." I wanted to protest, to explain. But what was left to say? I had become a ghost with a paycheck, a name on the mortgage, a voice through a screen. The next morning, I boarded my flight, opened my laptop, and got back to work. The Amazon contract closed on a rainy Thursday in June. I remember the boardroom's echo, the feel of the Mont Blanc pen in my hand, the congratulatory handshake from the CIO. Cameras clicked, champagne bottles hissed open. It was the largest logistics partnership in the company's history, and I was the name attached to the top. That night, I stood alone in my hotel room, watching the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. I had just earned a $1 million performance bonus, a 7-figure deal tied to years of late nights, red-eye flights, and weekends missed. I could afford anything now, be anywhere, buy anything. Except maybe time. I called Lily to tell her. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "That's great, Nate," she said, voice flat. "Congrats." "I was thinking," I said, "maybe I'd surprise Mason with a trip to Disneyland next month. Just the 3 of us." There was silence on the other end. "He's outgrown that, Nate. He's almost 9. 9. When did that happen?" I flew home 2 days later, hoping a big gesture could bridge the silence. Lily had always loved the idea of a vintage convertible, the kind her dad once drove when she was a girl. I found the exact model in pristine condition, deep navy blue, ivory leather seats. I didn't ask her. I wanted it to be a surprise. The day it was delivered, I walked into the kitchen, keys in hand, grinning like a teenager. "Come outside," I said. "You'll never guess what I found." She looked up from her laptop, eyes weary. "Did you buy a car?" "Not just a car. Your dream car." She followed me out, arms crossed. When she saw it, her face didn't light up. She touched the door handle, looked inside, nodded slightly. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you." But it sounded like she was reading the words off a cue card. That night, she went to bed early. Mason didn't look up from his tablet when I walked past. I sat in the living room alone, wondering how a house so full could feel so empty. The next morning, I went into the garage to put some documents in the filing cabinet where we kept old records. Birth certificates, tax returns, that kind of thing. As I searched for the right folder, a corner of a manila envelope caught my eye. It was tucked behind a stack of user manuals, labeled in Lily's handwriting, "Legal Draft." I opened it. Inside were divorce papers, unsigned, unfiled, but fully prepared. Her name filled in. Mine, too. Dated 6 months earlier. My hands trembled. She had been ready to leave. At some point, she had printed this out, sat down at our kitchen table, and considered a future without me. And then, she didn't. I didn't tell her I found them. I didn't confront her. What would I say? That I was sorry? That I hadn't noticed? That I had bought her a car because I didn't know how else to say, "Please love me again"? That weekend, I tried harder. I woke up early, made pancakes, her favorite, with blueberries. I offered to take Mason to his soccer game. He said his friend's dad was already taking him. Lily thanked me but stayed quiet, reading at the kitchen table while I hovered, desperate for a sign. She finally looked up. "You're here," she said. "But it's like you're still gone." I nodded. I couldn't argue. She was right. I had built a life around the idea of success, and somewhere along the way, I had mistaken presence for proximity, love for luxury, loyalty for obligation. My house had 5 bedrooms, but no space left for warmth. My calendar was full, but my life was hollow. That night, I sat in the parked convertible outside our home, staring at the porch light. I had spent so long chasing what I thought would make me worthy of security, of respect, of love, that I hadn't noticed the people I wanted it all for had stopped waiting. I had the car, the contract, the career, but my son no longer ran into my arms, and my wife had already packed her heart away. Lily stopped asking me what time I'd be home. At first it was subtle. Instead of texting, "When will you be back?" she'd just leave dinner in the fridge and put Mason to bed without waiting. No more reminders about school events or grocery lists. She took the wheel, quietly, completely. She became a single parent in everything but name. Mason had always been attached to her, but now the bond hardened into something exclusive. They shared jokes I didn't understand, routines I wasn't part of. I'd walk into the kitchen in the morning and find them laughing over cereal, then fall silent when I entered, not out of malice but habit. My presence disrupted more than it contributed. One Saturday, I offered to drive Mason to soccer practice. He blinked at me like I'd suggested we go skydiving. "Grandpa takes me," he said flatly. My father-in-law, Frank, had stepped in more and more over the past year. Retired, kind, consistent, he showed up when I couldn't. Mason adored him, called him coach, watched football with him, fixed bikes in the driveway with him, the kind of time I used to imagine having. One afternoon, I got home early. Frank was in the garage teaching Mason how to use a wrench. "Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty," he said, smiling. Mason laughed. "You say that every time." "It's always true." I stood there in the doorway, watching my son look at another man like he was the center of the world, and I didn't blame either of them. I'd left a vacancy. Frank had filled it. Later that night, I asked Mason if he wanted to watch a movie. He didn't look up from his tablet. "I'm playing something." "It's Saturday. We used to have movie nights, remember?" He shrugged. "That was when I was little." He was 8. I started calling him more when I traveled. FaceTime, texts, voice memos. Sometimes he picked up, sometimes not. Once I called during a break in a meeting and he answered. His face filled the screen for barely 5 seconds. "Hey buddy," I began. "I'm busy," he said, and hung up. The ache was sharp. Not because of what he said, but how easily he said it. I wasn't his priority anymore. I hadn't earned that right in years. Lily didn't stop me from trying, but she didn't help either. Our conversations became mechanical. Scheduling, updates, logistics. No laughter, no warmth. Her voice had the tone of someone doing business with a polite stranger. Then came the twist that cracked something deep. I was at the airport, waiting to board a flight to Atlanta, when I scrolled through Instagram during a lull. I hadn't logged in for weeks. Most of my feed was business contacts, tech influencers, startup news. But then I saw a post tagged by one of Lily's friends. It was a birthday party. Backyard decorations, string lights, a homemade cake with "Happy Birthday Ellie" in pink frosting. In the middle of the photo was Lily, smiling wide, Mason at her side, both holding plates and laughing. She was leaning into a friend, head thrown back in mid-laughter. They looked alive, radiant, whole. And I wasn't there. I hadn't even known about the party. No one had told me. I didn't recognize half the faces in the background. New people, a new circle, a world Lily and Mason had built without me. I stared at the photo for 10 minutes, numb to the boarding calls around me. In that image, they didn't look like people missing someone. They looked like people who had moved on. I forwarded the post to myself, saved it. For some reason, I needed proof. Evidence of what was slipping through my fingers. Evidence that this wasn't just in my head, that the walls had shifted, the center of gravity had changed. That night in my hotel room, I replayed our old home videos. Mason's 3rd birthday, a family trip to the lake, a snowball fight in the yard where I wore a ridiculous red scarf and Lily was breathless with laughter. That version of us was gone. Not because of one moment, because of 1,000 ignored ones. I had built a world where I didn't fit anymore, and everyone else had figured that out long before I did. The first time Lily suggested couples counseling, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I thought she was exaggerating. "We're not that bad," I said, waving her off. "We just need a vacation, a reset." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't place. Half tired, half gone. "I already took a vacation," she said quietly, "from waiting. I promised we'd talk about it after the quarter ended, then after the next launch, then after the Amazon renewal. But somehow every after got swallowed by a new now. We never made it to therapy. Instead, she went alone. I found the business card tucked in her purse once, from a Dr. Melinda Chang, family therapist. I didn't ask. She didn't offer. One night I came home to find a folder on the dining table. It was Mason's schoolwork. Drawings, test scores, writing assignments. Lily had left it out for me to see. A silent invitation. I flipped through until I found it. A handwritten essay in pencil titled "The Person I Wish I Could See." It began, "I miss my dad. Not the one who calls from airports. The one who used to chase me around the backyard and read books at bedtime." It ended. "If I had one wish, I'd ask to have dinner with him. But he's always busy. Maybe when I'm older, he won't be." I read it twice, then a third time. My throat closed up. My hands shook. I put the paper back in the folder, walked upstairs, and stood outside his bedroom door, listening to him breathe. The next morning, I bought him a new bike, left it in the garage with a bow, a desperate gesture in place of real presence. He rode it twice, then forgot about it. The wake-up moments didn't stop. They came in waves, each one louder than the last. Lily stopped adding me to family calendars, school plays, parent-teacher nights, doctor appointments, all done without me. I didn't even realize I'd been cut out until months later, when Mason mentioned his science fair. "You never came," he said matter-of-factly. "But Mom took pictures." I looked at Lily. She didn't flinch. "You were in Denver," she said. closing the warehouse deal. I started making excuses, trying to claw back relevance. I didn't know, I said. You didn't ask, she replied. The final blow came from an unexpected place. My protege, Adam. We were in the office late one Friday night, reviewing projections. He was 27, sharp, hungry, just like I had been. We ordered takeout, talked strategy, swapped notes on scaling the new Southwest hub. At some point, the conversation drifted. Do you ever regret anything? He asked. Like what? Spending so much time here, missing things, family stuff. I smirked. Regret comes with the territory. He hesitated, then said, I admire you, Nate. You've built something incredible. But if I had to lose my wife to get there, I don't know if I'd want it. The words hit me like a slap. He hadn't meant to wound me. That was what made it worse. He said it without malice, as a truth he assumed I'd already accepted. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That night I drove home in silence. I passed by the park where I used to take Mason on weekends. The swings were empty. The slide glistened under the streetlights, and I remembered pushing him, his tiny hands gripping the chains, his voice shouting, Higher, Daddy! I couldn't remember the last time he said my name like that. When I walked through the front door, the house was dark. Lily had left a single light on in the hallway. I stepped into the kitchen and found a plate of dinner, wrapped in foil, on the counter. Next to it was a sticky note in her handwriting. Mason has a field trip tomorrow. Don't forget to sign the permission slip. No good night. No welcome home. Just logistics. A transaction. We had become business partners in the quiet disassembly of a marriage. I stood there, holding that note, feeling more like a ghost than a husband, more like a benefactor than a father. All the signs were there. The silence, the substitutions, the stares from my son that no longer searched for affection, just distance. I saw them. I just didn't move. And by the time I wanted to, it was almost too late. Christmas had always been Lily's favorite holiday. She loved string lights, old movies, baking gingerbread with Mason, while Nat King Cole played softly in the background. She used to make a big deal out of it, even when we were broke, even when Mason was too young to remember. That year, I offered to host Christmas Eve dinner at our place. I cleared my calendar weeks in advance, booked no flights, canceled every meeting. I bought the biggest tree on the lot and spent an afternoon decorating it, untangling lights while Mason watched from the couch, uninterested. I was trying. I really thought I was trying. But trying late is like showing up after the credits roll. Nobody's clapping anymore. Lily didn't say much during dinner. She carved the roast, passed the rolls, laughed at Frank's old stories, but none of it reached her eyes. Mason barely looked at me. He opened gifts quickly, thanked people politely, then disappeared upstairs with his new tablet. After the guests left, I stood at the sink rinsing dishes while Lily packed leftovers. I think this was good, I said, hopeful. We should do this more often. She didn't look at me. Nate, she said, let's not pretend. I turned off the faucet. Pretend what? That this, she waved around the kitchen, means we're okay. That one dinner makes up for years of absence. I'm trying, I said. I know, she whispered, but I'm tired of waiting for trying to become being. She went upstairs. I stood alone, water dripping from my fingers, heart pounding. 2 days later, on the morning of December 27th, I opened my email during a meeting prep. Buried between vendor invoices and logistics summaries was a message from Lily. Subject line: The 3-person plan. I clicked it, assuming it was a forwarded itinerary from a school trip, or maybe something cute Mason had written. It wasn't. It was a detailed outline. School schedules, budget plans, daily routines, split responsibilities, transportation rotations, weekend activity calendars. But as I scanned the names and notes, one thing became clear. The three people she referred to were herself, Mason, and Frank. I wasn't on the list. I read the email twice, then 3 times. My name didn't appear anywhere. Not as Dad, not as Nate. I wasn't in the pickup schedule, not in the emergency contact section, not in the holiday plans. I was an omission so complete it felt surgical. And what broke me wasn't the list itself. It was how calmly it had been written, how efficiently. No anger, no threats. Just the simple reality of a life designed to function without me. I closed my laptop and stared out the office window. The skyline shimmered with holiday lights. Somewhere in the city, people were holding hands, exchanging gifts, making memories, and my wife was drawing up blueprints for a life that excluded me. I drove home early that evening, walked through the front door to the smell of leftover pie and pine needles. The living room was quiet. Lily was reading on the couch. Mason wasn't around. I sat across from her. "I read your email." She didn't look up. "I figured you would." "Is that where we're at now?" She sighed. "I needed a plan that works, one that doesn't depend on maybes and promises." "I've canceled everything for January," I said. "No travel, no meetings after 5. I'm here." "I've heard that before." Her voice was steady, but something in her eyes flickered, like a candle almost gone. "I miss you," I said. "You miss the idea of us," she replied, "not the reality of who we are now." There it was, the quiet truth I'd been dodging for years. The following week, Mason stopped calling me altogether. Before, he'd answer out of obligation, say a few words, then hang up. Now, when I called, it went straight to voicemail. When I texted, I got one-word replies. "Cool. Okay. Thanks." I stopped trying to FaceTime him. It felt like knocking on a door that had already been bricked shut. At work, people noticed I was quieter, less driven. Adam offered to help with a major pitch. I handed it over without a fight. My boss asked if I was feeling burned out. "I'm just reprioritizing," I said. He nodded, like he understood, but he didn't. No one really did. Because how do you explain that you've become a stranger in your own home? That your wife speaks to you like a guest? That your child no longer believes your love includes showing up? You don't. You just sit with it. And if you're lucky, it breaks you before it buries you. The ceremony was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the State Capitol Auditorium. Mason was one of 5 students in the entire state being honored for academic excellence and leadership. Invitations had gone out weeks before. Lily had told me twice, even sent a reminder with the address. I had nodded, said I'd be there, meant it too, until the email from Tokyo came. Amazon Japan wanted to finalize a cross-continental partnership. The deal had been in the works for a year. The executives were flying in for one day only, and they requested me personally. "Your name sealed this deal," my boss said. "We need you in that room." So I went. I told myself it was the responsible thing, the necessary thing, the right thing. Just this once. Just this one more time. The meeting ran long. The negotiations went well. Everyone shook hands, laughed over sushi, toasted over sake. The photos we took would end up in a press release. My name would appear in logistics journals. Investors would smile. At 6:04 p.m., I stepped out to check my phone. 12 missed calls. 2 from Lily, 10 from my mother-in-law. I opened the group text Lily had created for the event. There was a video link. The caption read simply, "His speech." I clicked. The footage opened with Mason standing on stage behind a wooden podium. He wore a navy blazer and a clip-on tie that looked slightly crooked. His posture was stiff, his expression unreadable. He began to speak. "I want to thank my mom for always being there," he said, "for helping me with science fairs and late-night study sessions, for believing I could do this." Applause. He continued. "I also want to thank my grandpa for teaching me how to fix things, and my teachers for challenging me, and my friends for making me laugh." Pause. "And my dad, well..." He looked up. For a split second, I thought I saw hesitation. Maybe he'd smile, maybe soften. "He couldn't come tonight. He had a business meeting. He's usually busy." He stared straight ahead, eyes locked on the camera. "But I'm sure wherever he is, he's doing something really important." No sarcasm, no sadness, just nothing. A factual statement. He moved on to thank the governor and stepped back from the podium. The crowd clapped. He walked off stage without looking back. I stood frozen in the hallway outside the conference room, surrounded by suits and handshakes, holding a phone that suddenly felt heavier than it ever had. I watched the clip 3 more times. Not because I didn't understand, because I couldn't believe it was real. The boy who once clung to my leg when I left for work had just told an entire state, on camera, that I was absent. And he didn't say it with anger. He said it with resignation. Like he'd finally accepted the kind of father I was. A man of meetings, a man of plans, a man of promises undelivered. I didn't go back into the conference room. I walked straight outside, hailed a cab, and told the driver to take me anywhere quiet. I ended up at a bar in Midtown, still in my suit, still holding my phone. The bartender looked up. "Rough day?" I nodded. "Celebration or regret?" "Both," I said. He poured me a drink. I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened my photos, scrolled through the years. First steps, first words, birthday cakes, Halloween costumes, school art projects. Almost every photo had Lily or Frank in it. I was a background blur, a shadow behind the camera, a note in the margin. I had always assumed there'd be more time, more weekends, more dinners, more chances to show up. But now, my son was becoming a man, and I was just a story he told when someone asked where his dad was. The taxi pulled up to the house just after midnight. Christmas lights still hung along the porch rail, flickering weakly in the wind. I stood there for a few seconds, holding my breath like a man about to enter a courtroom, not his own home. The door was unlocked. The hallway was quiet. No suitcase, no yelling, just silence. I walked into the living room and found Lily sitting on the couch, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There were no tears, no visible anger, just a calm stillness that felt worse than rage. She looked up, met my eyes, and said nothing. I opened my mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain, but she raised a hand and stood. "I left something for you on the table," she said. Then she walked past me, up the stairs, without another word. On the dining table was a plain white envelope with my name in her handwriting. Inside was a letter, neatly typed, no frills, just facts. "Nate, since you seem to measure life in milestones and deliverables, here are a few of ours, the ones you missed." Then came the list. Mason's first steps, recorded by video, sent to your work email, unread first birthday, party at the park, you were in Phoenix first ER visit, high fever, I held him alone. First words, he said, "Mama," then "light," then "ball." Never "dad." First day of preschool, he cried at drop-off. You promised you'd be there first soccer goal. He looked for you in the stands Halloween. You sent a costume from Amazon kindergarten graduation. We sat in the front row. Your seat was empty first sleepover. He asked why he had to call Grandpa, not you. First bad dream. You were in Tokyo, first tooth lost. He saved it to show you. It turned brown, first pet. He named the goldfish Frank School Talent Show. He played piano alone. His 7th birthday, he didn't want a party, just a call that never came. The day he asked, "Do I have a dad?" When he stopped asking for bedtime stories, when he stopped hugging me goodbye, when he asked if it was his fault you were never around, when I had to say, "No, it's not." When he stopped hoping you'd come tonight, his biggest achievement, the one he worked for all year. You chose Tokyo. I read each line slowly, like a man peeling off his own skin. At the bottom, beneath the list, was one more line. If you weren't home tonight, I had decided to leave tomorrow. I packed last week. That was it. No threat. No plea. Just a line in the sand. I sat down at the table, the letter trembling in my hands. All the years I thought I had been providing, protecting, building something. And here it was. 21 stones marking a trail I'd never walked beside them. I heard a drawer close upstairs. Lily was still awake. I climbed the stairs slowly and found her in Mason's room. He was asleep. She was tucking in the edges of his blanket, smoothing his hair. The kind of quiet devotion that needs no witness. She turned when she saw me in the doorway. Didn't speak. I held up the letter. I read it. She nodded once. I didn't know. Her eyes narrowed. Don't say that. You chose not to know. I swallowed hard. I was trying to build something for us. She looked at me then, really looked, and what I saw wasn't hatred. It was mourning. You were building something, she said. But it wasn't for us. It was for the man in the mirror. And you lost us to him. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my sleeping son. He looked so peaceful, unaware that his father had missed more than milestones. He had missed becoming a memory worth keeping. I want to fix it, I whispered. She didn't answer. I stayed there for a long time, not moving, not speaking. Just sitting beside the child I barely knew, and the woman I once promised the world to, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that I had already delivered on that promise. I just gave her the wrong world. The next morning, the house was silent. Lily had taken Mason to school. She didn't leave a note, didn't text, and I didn't expect her to. I wandered the house like a man walking through a museum of someone else's life. The walls were lined with pictures, Mason in Halloween costumes, at science fairs, in soccer uniforms I barely recognized. Lily smiling beside him, her arm always around his shoulders, her face always turned toward the light. I wasn't in most of them, and in the few I was, I looked like a visitor. Stiff, tired, distracted. In my office, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Buried in a folder labeled Family, I found dozens of emails from Lily. Most unread, some marked important. They went back years. Mason's first steps. He said his first word, ball. Here's his performance at school today. He was nervous but amazing. I clicked the first one. A grainy video opened. Mason barely walking, wobbling toward the camera. Lily's voice behind it, laughing, encouraging. You can do it, baby. Go to daddy. But I wasn't there. The next clip was him saying, Mama. He sat on a rug, clutching a rubber duck. He said it twice, then giggled, waiting for someone to clap. I never did. I watched them all. The school play, the dance in the living room, his first attempt at reading a book on his own, stumbling over syllables but refusing to quit. Each video a brick in the monument of my absence. I didn't realize I was crying until the screen blurred. I leaned back, hands over my face, shame tightening in my chest. How many moments had I traded for contracts and quarterly bonuses? How many smiles had I missed in pursuit of applause from strangers? I opened the drawer beside the desk, looking for tissues, and my hand brushed against a picture frame. Our wedding photo. Lily in her simple white dress, me in my rented tux, both of us young and impossibly hopeful. I turned it over. There, written in Lily's handwriting on the back, was a sentence that stopped my breath. I always believed you would choose us. Not I hope, not I wish. I believed. The weight of that faith crushed me. She had believed. Through the long nights, the lonely birthdays, the missed dinners, the broken promises, she had believed that eventually I would stop chasing the world and turn back toward the home we built. And I didn't. I placed the photo on the desk, stared at it for what felt like hours. I saw two people in love. I saw the boy I used to be, the one who swore to be the father he never had, the husband who showed up. And I saw the man I became, successful, respected, alone. That afternoon, I called my assistant and told her to cancel everything for the month. Everything? She asked, stunned. The Q1 reviews? The Tokyo team? All of it. But I'm done, Jen. For now. Maybe for good. Then I turned off my work phone, shoved it in a drawer, and closed the office door behind me. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the next meeting, the next flight, the next big win. I was thinking about dinner, about being there when Mason walked through the door, about sitting at the table and not checking my phone, about proving somehow that I could still choose them, not through words, but through every choice that came next. I walked into my boss's office the following Monday with a folded letter in my hand. Not a resignation email, a real letter, signed, dated, tangible, dated like it deserved the weight of the decision behind it. He looked up from his laptop, surprised. Nate, I didn't expect you in this early. I'm stepping down, I said simply. He blinked. From the Amazon account? From everything. There was a pause, then laughter, nervous, shallow. Is this a joke? I laid the letter on his desk. No, it's a reckoning. He sat back. This is career suicide. Maybe, I said, but I've already killed the parts that mattered. He started talking about legacy, timing, golden handcuffs. I stopped listening. I didn't owe the company another second. I'd given it decades. Given it Christmases and birthdays and first steps. Now I was giving Mason lunch. I drove straight to his school, waited outside in the parent pickup lane, heart pounding like I was 15 again. At noon, he walked out with his class, backpack slung low, eyes scanning for someone else. When he saw me, he froze. I stepped out, waved. Want to get burgers? He hesitated. Why? Because it's Monday. Because I'm your dad. Because I finally remembered what matters. He climbed in slowly, guarded. We drove in silence. At the diner, he ordered chicken tenders, still skeptical. I let him talk, about school, about a kid named Noah who always cheated at kickball, about a math quiz he aced. Halfway through his milkshake, he looked at me. You don't have your laptop? Nope. You're not on a call? Nope. He took another sip, watching me. Is this For real? It is, I said. And I'm sorry it took me so long. We didn't fix everything over fries and ketchup, but he laughed once, a real laugh. And when we got back to the school parking lot, he said, "You can come again next week, if you're not busy." It was more than I deserved, but it was a start. That evening, I took the long way home, past the old apartment where Lily and I first lived, past the lake where I proposed, past the bookstore where we used to meet for lunch breaks when money was tight and time was tighter. Every place felt like a memory I hadn't earned in years. The next day, I called a dealership in another state and tracked down a 1998 Honda Accord. Midnight green, manual transmission, slight rust on the bumper, just like ours had. I had it shipped home and parked it in the driveway without telling Lily. When she saw it, she stopped mid-step, staring. "That can't be." "It is," I said. "Found one almost identical. Thought we could take a drive." She stood there for a moment, hands trembling. "You kept saying I forgot who we were. I'm trying to remember." We drove for hours. To the old sandwich shop near her college. To the trail we hiked before Mason was born. To the overlook where she once told me she wanted 3 kids and a garden and a life that didn't revolve around money. Neither of us spoke much. Words felt too small. That night, after Mason was asleep, Lily and I sat on the porch. I brought out my laptop, opened my work email, and began deleting. Not archiving, deleting, meeting invites, budget proposals, client updates, all of it. She watched in silence, unsure. Then I clicked on the account settings. "Are you sure you want to deactivate this account?" the screen asked. I clicked yes. Lily stared at me, and then slowly, tears welled in her eyes. She pressed her palms to her face, exhaled. "I never needed you to quit," she whispered. "I just needed you to choose." "I know," I said. "I stopped believing you ever would." "I stopped believing I could," I replied. She didn't say anything else, just leaned into me, for the first time in years, and in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't the end of my career. It was the beginning of my life. The first week after I quit, nothing changed. At least not in the way I'd hoped. I was home in time for dinner, helped wash dishes, even sat with Mason during homework. But he barely looked at me. When I asked about his day, his answers were clipped. "Fine. Nothing. I don't know." I offered to take him to school the next morning. He shrugged. "Grandpa already does." "I can go with you both." "No offense," he said without looking up, "but you'll probably have to leave halfway." The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were earned. He wasn't angry. He was used to disappointment. The next night, Lily and I sat on the couch watching a show we used to binge before Mason was born. She wasn't really paying attention. Her body was beside me, but her mind was elsewhere. "Did you mean it?" she asked finally, eyes still on the screen. "Mean what?" "That this time is different." "I meant it." She turned to me, slow and steady. "You've meant it before, Nate. 100 times. I nodded, and I broke it. 100 times. She studied me. "You know what the worst part was? It wasn't the work or the hours. It was watching Mason learn not to count on you." I didn't answer. I couldn't. She stood. "He needs more than promises. We both do." The next morning, I packed a small overnight bag and checked into a motel 3 blocks from Mason's school. It wasn't glamorous. Fluorescent lighting, thin sheets, a vending machine that only took quarters. But it was close. Walking distance. No excuses. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., shaved, dressed, and stood outside the school gates at 7:10. When Mason arrived with Frank, he saw me and paused. "What are you doing here?" he asked, cautious. "Walking you in." "Why?" "Because I can. Because I should have been doing this for years." He didn't say anything, just walked past me, but he didn't tell me to leave. That was something. I waited outside again at 3 p.m., leaned against the fence like the other parents. When he walked out, he looked surprised. "You're still here?" "Every day," I said. "Sure," he muttered, brushing past. But the next morning, he looked for me when he got out of the car. I stayed at that motel for 60 days, rain or shine, hot or freezing, weekdays and weekends. I was there, every drop-off, every pickup, every forgotten lunch run, every emergency permission slip, every early dismissal. Some days, he barely acknowledged me. Other days, he let me carry his backpack. Once, he handed me a granola bar and said, "You look tired." It was the first unsolicited kindness in months. Lily knew I wasn't staying at home. She never asked why. I think she knew the answer. About 3 weeks in, she called one night. "You okay?" "Yeah." "Still at that motel?" "Yep." "Isn't it awful?" "It is." She paused. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I need to prove something." "To me?" "To Mason, and to myself." At week 4, Mason opened the car door one morning and said, "You can come to the game this weekend, if you want." "I'd love to." "It's not a big deal." "It is to me." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. The motel clerk started calling me Mr. Routine, left extra towels without asking, a small badge of honor. Day 45, I got a cold. Bad one. Fever, chills. I thought about skipping, but I bundled up, stood outside the school gates with a thermos of tea and a half-wet tissue in my pocket. Mason saw me, jogged over and asked, "You sick?" "A little." "You don't have to come if you're dying or whatever." "I'll survive." He nodded. "Okay, but you better not miss Friday. We're doing presentations." "I'll be there." Friday came. I sat in the back of the classroom while Mason stood in front, explaining photosynthesis with homemade diagrams. When he finished, he scanned the room, and his eyes landed on me. This time he smiled. That night, I came home. For good. Lily was in the kitchen. Mason was upstairs. She turned when she heard the door. "You're back." "Yeah." "Done proving something?" "No," I said. "Just getting started." It started with little things. Mason asking me to pass the salt at dinner. Lily laughing once, then twice, at some dumb joke I made about burnt toast. A Saturday morning where no one asked, "Do you have a meeting?" Just slow, quiet moments. Unremarkable on the surface, earth-shifting underneath. I began learning the rhythm of the house again. How Mason liked 2 slices of toast, not 1. That he hated pulp and orange juice. That his new favorite band was something called Digital Eclipse, which made my ears bleed but earned his grin when I tried to hum along. At night, he'd retreat to his room early, still guarded. But one evening, I knocked on the door before bed. "Mind if I sit?" He nodded, motioned to the beanbag chair in the corner. I took it, careful not to crowd him. We talked about his science project. I offered to help him build a solar system model. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. That was progress. The next evening, he poked his head into the living room while I was watching a documentary. "Do you still remember how to play chess?" I paused the screen. I never forgot. He disappeared and came back with the board. We played. He won, twice. I told him I let him. He called me a liar and smirked. That smirk was everything. One night after dinner, I passed his room and heard him humming to himself. I knocked. "Yeah?" he said, half buried in his blanket fort. I stepped inside. "Can I sit with you for a minute?" He shifted to make space. The room was dim, one lamp in the corner. He fiddled with the hem of his blanket for a few seconds, then said, "Did you know I'm scared of the dark?" "No," I said gently. "I didn't. I didn't tell you before. You were always gone at bedtime." My throat tightened. "Well," I said, "I'm here now. Want me to stay?" He hesitated, then nodded. I turned off the lamp, lay on the floor beside his bed. The dark settled around us, quiet and soft. "Tell me a story," he said. "What kind?" "Doesn't matter. Just talk until I fall asleep." So I did. I told him about a boy who built a spaceship out of cereal boxes and flew to Saturn with his goldfish. I made it up as I went, trying to remember how to stretch a bedtime tale like I used to. Halfway through, I heard his breathing slow, but before he drifted off completely, he mumbled something. "Lau roi moi tai bonu hoi con bei." It was soft, barely audible, and he said it in Vietnamese, a language Lily had been teaching him to connect with her roots. I had never learned it, never made time, but I understood. "It's been a long time since you were like the dad I had when I was little." I lay there in the dark, silent tears running down my cheeks, realizing that somewhere beneath the years of missed birthdays and half-kept promises, the little boy still remembered who I used to be, and maybe, just maybe, still believed I could be that man again. The next day, I bought a Vietnamese phrase book. Lily found it on the counter and raised an eyebrow. "I want to learn," I said. "Not just the words, everything." She smiled, slow and guarded. "That's going to take time." "I've got time now." That weekend, we all went to the farmer's market together. Not a big deal, just an ordinary Saturday. But Mason held my hand for the first time in years, not because he had to, because he wanted to. At one stall, the vendor gave us a discount for buying 2 loaves of bread. Lily joked, "Looks like we're officially a family pack again." No one laughed, but no one disagreed. Progress wasn't dramatic. It was slow, uneven. Some days Mason was warm, some days cold. Some nights Lily stayed up with me talking. Other nights she said goodnight from the hallway. But the distance was shrinking. One night, I told Mason I'd be away for a single-day trip, just an alumni panel, nothing more. He looked up from his book. "You'll be back by bedtime?" "Promise." He nodded, then paused. "You've been keeping your promises lately." It was the highest praise I'd received in years. When I returned that evening, he was waiting on the porch steps. "I saved you the last cookie," he said, handing it over. It was burnt around the edges, crumbled on one side. It was perfect. I never thought I'd wear a hoodie to work, or that work would mean folding chairs in a community center, not boardrooms with polished floors. But here I was, pouring lukewarm coffee into paper cups and setting out name tags for a room full of fathers, some in suits, some in jeans, all of them tired. The banner behind me read, "Balanced Dads, a space for working fathers to reconnect." It had started small, just a Facebook group, then a monthly meetup. I shared my story, what I'd lost, what I was clawing back. Others opened up. Word spread. A nonprofit formed. Grants came in. And one day, they asked me to lead it. Now, I was executive director of something that didn't pad a portfolio, but filled something deeper. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I sat in a circle with other men who looked like I used to, haunted by missed ballet recitals and unread bedtime books, and we worked through it, slowly, honestly. Together. I wasn't saving the world. I was just helping a few dads find their way home. One afternoon, after a session, I stepped out into the sunlight to find Lily waiting in the parking lot. She wore that yellow sundress I hadn't seen in years. She smiled at me the way she used to when we were still learning each other. "Got a minute?" she asked. I climbed into the passenger seat. She handed me a to-go cup of tea. Chamomile, my favorite. "I was thinking," she said as we drove. "We've been doing well." I nodded. "We have. Maybe it's time." I turned to her, cautious. Time for what? She glanced at me, a playful spark in her eyes. "To date again." I almost laughed, except I was too stunned. "You mean, like you and me?" "No," she smirked. "Me and Frank, of course you and me." We both burst into laughter. It was easy, light, the kind of joy that comes only after surviving the deep. A week later, we sat down as a family and made plans for a road trip. Just the three of us. No, wait. The four of us. Because Mason had a surprise. On the last day of school, he handed me a drawing he'd done for art class. Crayon, pencil, careful coloring. A house, a tree, a crooked sun in the corner. And in front of the house, 4 stick figures holding hands. One tall with spiky hair, one with long brown curls, one smaller with glasses, and beside them, a floppy-eared dog with a red collar. I blinked. "You got a dog?" I asked. Mason grinned. "We all voted. You were outnumbered." I stared at the picture, heart swelling. He pointed at the top corner where he'd written in block letters, "My family, Dad, Mom, me, and Lucky." I looked at Lily. She nodded. "Shelter pickups tomorrow." As Lucky bounded into our lives, clumsy, loud, endlessly excited, it felt symbolic. A mess we chose together. A chaos we would share. That summer, we packed up the old Honda I'd restored, tossed in snacks, music playlists, and a fold-up tent we had no idea how to use. We drove through 3 states, stopping at odd museums, dusty diners, parks where Mason taught Lucky to chase frisbees. We got lost twice, argued over directions, slept under a sky full of stars. And one night, as we sat around a campfire, Mason leaned against my shoulder and whispered, "This is the kind of trip we used to dream about." I didn't correct him, because now it wasn't a dream. It was real. And we were in it. Together. The auditorium was packed. Rows of folding chairs filled with parents shifting nervously, whispering, clutching camcorders and phones, ready to record whatever their child said on stage. I sat next to Lily in the second row. Mason had insisted we come early. "Front row seats," he'd said, "for front row people." I held the program in my hands. Family Reflections, a celebration of growth. Each student had written something about their family. No speeches were pre-screened. Whatever they said would be raw, real, theirs. I didn't know what Mason would say. I didn't ask. A year ago, I might have emailed the teacher, requested notes, tried to control the message. Now, I just waited. One by one, students stepped forward. Some spoke with shaky voices, others with theatrical flair. Then it was Mason's turn. He stepped up to the mic, glanced down at his index cards, then looked at the audience. "My name is Mason," he began, "and this is about my family." He paused. For a long time, my family felt like a triangle. Just me, Mom, and Grandpa. It worked. We were strong, but it was missing something. He looked at me. My dad was gone a lot. I didn't think he'd come back. Not really. A hush fell over the room. But then one day he did. He smiled, soft but certain. And he stayed. I felt Lily's hand brush against mine. Mason continued. Now our house feels like a circle. Everyone touches, everyone matters. We even got a dog, which Dad said he didn't want but loves the most. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I want to say thank you, he said, voice steady, eyes fixed on me. Thank you for coming back, for staying, for choosing us. He stepped down. No theatrics, no tears, just truth. And it was more than enough. That night, after we put Lucky to bed, yes, the dog had a bedtime, I sat at the dining table and pulled out a notebook. I wrote something I'd been thinking about for weeks, maybe for years. A letter to fathers like me. If you're reading this from a boardroom instead of your child's bedroom, stand up. If your calendar is full, but your dinner table is empty, stand up. Because love doesn't wait. Children don't wait. And happiness will not pause for your convenience. I didn't write it for a book or a blog. I wrote it for the walls of our nonprofit center. A piece of legacy that wouldn't collect dust behind glass but live in the hands of men trying to find their way home. That weekend, I read it aloud at a workshop. Some cried, some stood up, some walked out and drove straight to their kids' baseball game. I got emails. I left the meeting, went home, hugged my daughter. Booked my first vacation in 5 years, just me and my boy. I deleted my inbox. Thank you. It was a ripple, a small one. But I knew ripples become waves when enough men choose to turn back before it's too late. At home, things weren't perfect. They weren't always smooth, but they were real. Mason still rolled his eyes at my jokes. Lily still corrected my folding technique. Lucky still barked at the mailman like he owed him money. But we sat at the same table every night. We played board games. We talked. And when Mason asked for help with a project, I didn't flinch. I just grabbed my coat and followed him into the garage. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Mason looked at me and said, "Do you think you'd be the same person if you hadn't messed up first?" I smiled. "No," I said. "I had to lose what mattered to understand how to hold it." He nodded, like that made sense to him. And in that moment, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from quiet, but the kind that grows in the middle of noise and love and second chances. This was the life I almost missed. And now, I would never let it go.